Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, and there's Shane. Welcome to the Monday, August 8th edition, live at 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Abel Marketing with our friend and background helper with websites, etc., Mr. Shane Birley. Shane is an accomplished author, writer, web designer, and he runs a company called Left Right Lens. And so Shane and I met back in 2011 for the Northern Voice Personal Blogging Conference. Would that be about right?
Has it? I feel like it's been longer, but if you say so, I feel like we met before then because there was some other
Maybe we
conference stuff
did.
that we did, but yeah, it's been a
Anyways,
while.
yeah. And so Shane's helped me with stuff like getting my Facebook Live up and running, and that's why I started using the Restream platform. Things of that nature, website help, what other stuff, content help, strategy. And so Shane, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself
Oh
and what you're
wow,
currently doing? Because
how
there's a
much
lot of
time have
stuff.
we got? How
There's
long
like
is this stream?
as long as we want it to be. But like one of the first things I remember was the original blogging for dummies, which I don't know if a lot of people know.
Oh yeah, that was well, to tell you the whole story of how that all happened. Um, Back in 2004,
Okay.
I had a friend that say, "Hey, I'm going to be writing with somebody that you know a book called BitTorrent for Dummies. Could you ghostwrite that for me because I don't have time?"
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
So I did that. So if you ever look at BitTorrent for Dummies, which I pretty sure is still in publication because Wiley never
Here, let's see if we
stops
can find it.
publishing.
Drop it in the chat.
But essentially, yeah. So I ghost wrote all that stuff, about half
Uh
of
huh.
that book or a third of that book. I've forgotten exactly how much I actually wrote, but or how much I
Right.
actually made it in. Um, but the whole thing was it was kind of, I don't know, it was fun. It had it introduced me to that whole process
Right.
of creating something out of nothing because BitTorrent was very, very new. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking about BitTorrent for Dummies. But essentially, that's where I started in the whole being an author. But my
Right.
background really is I'm a huge nerd. I I do stuff from server work all the way through helping people learn
Right.
how to write. Because I'm this weird nerd who uh, went and paused being a nerd for a while to go and do an English degree back in the mid '90s, and
Right.
so I graduated from that, and that's kind of how I tend to attack things because I know that there are nerds, and I like nerds, but I don't like a lot of nerds because they don't have the patience to actually explain stuff to people. So that's kind of where I come from for most of the stuff that I do.
Right.
But yeah, that's like the weirdest way to describe what somebody does. Hi,
I
I'm
guess it
Shane.
is.
I'm a huge nerd. Um,
Come on.
but yeah,
There's one.
but the whole book thing, definitely, yeah. So that then of course, blogging for dummies came out a couple
Right.
years later, and the very first, or sorry, it was the second edition, I think,
Okay.
and they said, "Hey, we know you ghost wrote this, so could you come help out?" So yeah, and then that led to, I think, the third and the fourth as well,
Nice.
um,
Nice.
and yeah, it was fun to do. And since then, I've written a couple of books for kids too. I've actually written some books for how to become a blogger, audio, or uh, how to become blah 10 skills, top skills to learn how to become a blogger, vlogger, and podcaster. And then I also did a video one as well, like a vlogging book for kids,
Oh
all for
wow. So
kids like
there's
10 to sort of 13, that sort of age group, which is
yeah. I
difficult
mean
to do.
yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that because I'm curious. I didn't know you'd done that one. I was looking at blogging for dummies online. They're up to the seventh edition. It looks like now.
Oh yeah, no, there's been several more.
Dummies.
Like I remember actually when we wrote the second edition,
Yeah.
uh,
Research
Twitter
it.
and Facebook didn't exist. Like they were just in their infancy. They hadn't
Oh
actually become
wow.
a thing. But
Right.
but then yeah, so for the books that I did, so basically a publisher in London actually emailed me out of the blue, 2016, I think 2015,
Right.
and said, hey, we've seen some of your stuff online and we think you'd be a great person to write this book for.
Right.
And so I did, and apparently it did well. So, because those kind of gigs in writing these days, it's sort of you write to be or you're writing for hire, so kind of thing.
Yep.
So, but it was fun because I think the hardest part about writing books for kids, especially about online stuff, is you have to actually broach the subject of, hi, you're going to be running into people who might not like you. You won't know why they don't like you, and they might say bad things about you or to you. So you have to kind of really cover that kind of stuff because when you're trying to tell this to their age group, which was 8 or so, they can't really, you can't really ignore it. Especially when I did the a couple years later, which was published I think in 2019, was the vlogging one, and that was even harder because you're trying to talk about YouTube, you're trying to talk about live streaming like Twitch and
Wow.
those
Yeah.
kinds of platforms, and Facebook especially. Like you're going to have people really coming in and saying nasty things,
Right.
and yeah, so it's unfortunate that you have to really have to talk about that stuff, but you have to. But
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
essentially that's sort of what the stuff that I've written so far. I'm probably going to do some more at some point, but yeah,
So now you're doing different things. But the main thing is I put the company link in the chat here so people can see it. So Left Right Minds is your company.
yeah,
And what are you working on with clients these days? It seems pretty varied. Like it seems like content, social media,
yeah.
strategy, web development. Um, I guess we could summarize it or say that it's all about building an online presence, maybe.
I summarize it as learning to love your tech, learning to.
Okay.
I mean, essentially, Left Right Minds is a consultancy because we do all
Right.
kinds of things, and where I help people with things like their web hosting, I help them with their website, I help
Right.
them with components on their website, like if they have a particular thing that they can't build or broke, or then I
Yeah.
can rebuild it or fix it or replace it with something that works better, that kind of stuff. Um, Say last week, for example, I had a couple days where a lot of the conversations were about strategy for how does somebody get into live streaming was one of the
Right.
conversations I had. How do they get into recording audio podcasts? And I always like to give people advice about how to do these kinds of things, but then I can actually show them how to do it. Where I find a lot of people that do the type of consulting that we do um, like to teach you about it, but they can't actually create the sort of things like some of the technologies they're not familiar with, or
Right.
where any new technology I tend to jump on, with the exception of TikTok. Never a fan of TikTok, but I still think it's a powerful platform, but it's definitely I am not a content creator for that. Um,
Interesting.
but there's also things like TikTok, for example. There's also competitors like Triller, where you can Triller is like a U.S. company that's basically TikTok, um, and I think that it doesn't get enough play for a lot of people. I think they should try it out and check it out.
Right.
But
Right.
anyway, yeah, big huge nerd that likes to help people do a lot of different things. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah,
So you've kind of progressed from, I wouldn't say the internet in its infancy, but from blogging definitely in its infancy led you to a lot of other things. And blogging was kind of and really for a lot of, I think, companies and businesses, it still should be the entrance into a lot of like marketing their own business and online presence.
yeah.
And now one of the questions I was going to ask you, because I know I've thought about it a lot, is where are we at with blogging today? Because I think people think now, well, blogging is just old hat and it's passe, and so is email. So why should I do it when everything else looks so much more attractive, like TikTok or like other social media platforms, right?
Well, I mean, the big problem that we have as the at the very beginning of the internet, there was a lot of promise, and then humanity got involved. So you have all of the issues that come along with
Nice.
that, and
Right.
blogging at the very beginning, at the very beginning, I will say late '90s, when websites started to kind of become a thing where you could actually make them a little more dynamic. Blogging was definitely a powerful tool, and then social media appeared on the scene and really decimated blogging for some time. But the problem is that social media really requires a very superficial attention span, where you have individuals that are looking for a very quick bit of information, and social media is really great for that. You can have a little bit of a little tidbit that gets you interested in what they want to talk about or what they want to
Right.
learn about, and then you can send them off to somewhere else. And that to me is not the best way to use social media, because you actually want to have some sort of conversation online.
Right.
But the problem is, over time, as people have either been busy or
Yeah.
people's attention spans have shrunk for whatever reason, because I think blogging is still powerful, and I think is actually becoming more powerful. I think people that were born in 2000 who are now in their 20s are actually seeing that blogging is something that they should invest their time in. Um, because the reality is, we are not competing against other blogs. We are not competing against other Twitter accounts. We are not competing against other TikToks or other YouTube channels. You are now competing against everything ever created at any time in history. So, for example, if you want to watch a 1945 film, you'll be able to do that. There's a lot of movie studios who are dumping that content onto YouTube. You have a lot of things like
Right.
archive.org where people are storing that kind of information too, because
Right.
it's deemed as having less value. But the problem is, what if you
Mm.
are in that world? Like, you're in that world of, say, I would like to make films just like they were made in the 40s. You suddenly have that entire catalog you're competing
Right.
against, and
Right.
everyone else who wants to do that. So people kind of think of their competition as being just the next channel over, or
Right.
the next personality over, and that's not true. You got to insert all of the streaming services that exist, from
Right.
Apple TV to Netflix, to insert all the other ones, and
Right.
it's becoming far more fractured. I mean, my major complaint about online communication tools is that the fracturing of that is so incredibly problematic, because I have people trying to get a hold of me personally as an
Mm.
individual on messenger.com or on Facebook Messenger, that little thing in the
Right.
bottom corner. The problem is, I don't use Messenger. I only use it when it's requested of me. So when people try to communicate with me, I don't respond, and then they might, oh, Shane's a jerk. He hasn't gotten on Messenger and replied to me. Well, actually, no. I have an email address. I have a phone number that I publish on my website, so you can still find me. It's just you haven't made the effort, because I refuse to do those sorts of things. But
Well,
anyway,
that's the whole thing, yeah. And I mean, I one of the other things is people could say stuff like blogging's not sexy enough anymore, or is
yeah,
blogging dead? Blogging is not exciting. But I think I remember back to years ago with Northern Voice when we were there and I was volunteering and then organizing. It was all about creating a personal voice for blogging. So there's a way to
yes,
look at blogging if you want to do personal writing and a personal voice. But then now it's also been used so much more as a sales tool for business to business, that there's really a lot of things you can do with blogging. It doesn't really cost you a lot of time and money to set something up, and then you've got your little corner on the internet or whatever you want to call it, where you've got your things happening. Um, I think also a lot of companies have taken on and adopted, small companies, like, oh yeah, I got a blog, but they don't really know why. And
yeah,
like, they have a blog on their website, but there's not much on it. So if you don't keep updating it and there's nothing on it, people aren't going to come back to it. So it kind of opens up a whole can of worms for people. I think sometimes with blogging and content, they think it's going to be, and I think this has applied to the web and websites since day one. They think it's something they can just do and leave. But once you open that box
yeah,
and you have a website and you have content, you have to keep updating it to keep bringing people back, right? And if you know someone comes in and goes, looks at your website for three
yeah,
seconds, oh, it hasn't been updated for 6 months. Okay, see it. I'm out of here.
exactly. I mean, that's the major problem. I mean, and the internet, well, actually, not the internet. Well, I guess the internet, but search engines in general, um, they don't reward you if you are a static place on the internet. They reward you if you are creating content that's being added to your website specifically.
Right.
Um, of course, that also applies to content creation of any kind. And this is the major problem that people run into when they get into doing blogging at all,
Yeah.
is they have so many options right now, where you could, uh, instead of writing something out, you could talk into a microphone and do a podcast. You could talk
Right.
into video and do a video instead. But I really, every time I recommend people, when they're creating content, if you're going to do anything, um, start with the idea of doing video, because it is going to give you a lot more flexibility than any of the other platforms just by themselves. So, for example, if I wanted to create a blog post about subject X, then I might record a video of it and be like, yeah, so
Nice.
subject X, it's really kind of awesome. It's really kind of cool, blah, 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 blah. And you could talk for 5 minutes.
Hmm.
But talking for 5 minutes could actually produce you potentially 700, 800 words in a blog post. So I always say, hey, take that video you've shot and put it into some sort of transcription service. And there's a billion of them out there. And take what you said, make it into text, and then edit that text. Edit away, make it prettier, make it polish it up a little bit. Because, when we talk, we bounce around, our tenses change all the time, and all these kinds of things. So being able to actually edit that text and make it a blog post will take a bit of work, but I think it's worth it. And um, then you have the other stuff
Hmm.
the other audio component where you've recorded the video, and you could take that and turn that into an actual audio podcast. So then you basically have been able to tackle three things at once,
Right.
and it's up to you what you use. I mean, this is the thing. If you're not comfortable on camera, then maybe video blogging is not your thing. If you're only comfortable with the text, you'll have it. If you just brain dump and then polish afterwards, that is totally acceptable. If you want to have an audio podcast, record the video, talk to Ben, blah 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 blah, and then turn that into an audio piece, you cover all the bases. And I'm huge on accessibility as well, specifically with blogging,
Hmm.
because text is always going to be king. Maybe for another couple of months, and then video might be king, but who knows? Video attracts people because it's a visual thing, but there's also the people that want to hear something. There's also the people that want to read something. So you're going to have to, find where your audience is for those kinds of things, and and in terms of accessibility, uh, people that don't have any hearing are not going to listen to a podcast. And podcasts have exploded over the last, say, 5 years or so. They've become really popular, uh,
Hmm.
but people don't take the effort to actually transcribe what they've created most of the time. There's a very small minority of people that actually take the time to take their audio, take their video, and actually do proper captions. So because it takes time, and it's understandable why people don't do it, but I really hope that more people get into it, especially as services get better at being able to recognize not just a single speaker, but it's when multiple speakers are talking. And that's
Hmm.
where the technology is sort of starting to catch up now, where it identifies that, say I'm talking and then you get excited and you launch another question at me, and the audio overlaps. The software is getting better at being able to identify who is speaking at what time, so you can actually
Right.
have overlapping dialogue in a meeting like this, and those kinds of things. I mean, right now I'm so excited about different tech. I mean, I always bounce around about, oh, you could do this and you could do that, and when I catch myself doing that, I said I tend to kind of draw back. I try to keep
Mhm.
myself a little more focused, but that's just how I get excited about different tech, because one of
Right.
my I don't know, my passion or my excitement or whatever you want to call it, uh, is trying to break through people's barriers into why they won't do something, why they won't record video, why they won't record audio, why they won't take the time to write out something. Because the reality is all of this stuff takes time. It all takes skill. It takes effort. And if somebody runs into like a problem where they've never edited video before, I can show them a tool that, like, there's tools out there now that you can take video, dump it into the system, it transcribes the whole thing, and all you have to do is edit the text that it's transcribed. It's like,
Which is
oh,
still what time.
I didn't, I talked for 10 minutes about my pug. Oh, I want to cut that part out. You just highlight the text, cut it,
Right.
and then the computer says, oh, well, we'll cut that video and then we'll take that out.
Yeah, I think what you've hit on is, and I put actually in the chat here in the comments, was I put the link in on Google to the Vlogger's Handbook, which you wrote, which was actually written pre-pandemic. So that's a whole other Facebook Live talk about
Oh,
how
yeah.
this kind of stuff has changed because of the pandemic. But one of the
Oh, it
things I think
totally
you've
has.
hit on is basically repurposing your content so that if you have it written or shot in video and then you transcribe the audio, you can basically create a blog post where you've got the video of it, and then you put it in there, and then you put the audio or the text around it, right? So there's so many things you can do. I think the other thing for businesses or anybody who's doing it as a way to promote their business is it takes time, and time is money, and they don't think
Yeah.
or they don't immediately earn ROI or revenue off of it. So they stop doing it because they haven't earned revenue from it like almost instantaneously or within a month or within a few blog posts, right? And so they don't see the value in it, and they think it's just taking up their time. We should probably wrap it up here because we're at 20 minutes. So thanks for all the insight. But I've left some links for everybody in the chat, including a couple things here. A link to the BitTorrent, the old BitTorrent for Dummies link from 2005. A link to Shane's website with his contact information. Use his phone number and email, not his
That's
messenger.
right. I want to touch on, just before we go, I want to touch on
Yeah,
the thing
go
you
ahead.
just said a second ago about the effort and the return of ROI. The
Yeah.
one thing that businesses do not recognize generally across the board
Yeah.
is they think that it's supposed to be a money-making thing, but the reality is, for social media and for
Mm-hmm.
online marketing in a very broad sense, is it's a long-term game.
Exactly.
Because I always tell people there's two things about your website, if you have a blog, whether it's video, audio, whatever it is that you're creating doorways into your website. So
Right.
if you talk about, so if you're like I don't know, a cake maker,
Right.
and you have a website where you have a video blog and these kinds of things, you never put the video blog on your website, you're neglecting the chance that somebody is going to look for something you said. So a phrase that you said in your video, they might not understand, they might search for that thing. And if you have that transcribed onto your website, that gives you all of these additional keywords. But it's not just about keywords, it's about the phrases people are looking for. And it gives you all of these. So if you have a website that has a blog on it that has 500 posts, you've given your website 500 additional doorways where somebody might find you. Because there's this weird assumption by most
Right.
people that I build websites for that they're going to go to the front page when they first come there. No, they're
Not
not. They're going
necessarily.
to go
They're
to
going
your
to Google search
contact
you.
page. They're going to go to your about
Google
page.
search
They're
you.
going to go to this thing. They want to
Yeah.
go to, you want them to go to your blog because it gives them additional stuff, and search engines additional stuff to work with to bring people there. And if
Yeah.
you're doing that on a regular basis, imagine having blogged every day for 10 years. Like, you
That's a
could
lot of
go,
fun.
oh my God, that thing I wrote 10 years ago is so out of date. And well, go back and update it. Go back and take the original text, add some additional text at the very top saying, this stuff has changed. Here are the new blog posts. Thank you for searching for this. Please go read the new stuff. There's no reason to ditch stuff all the time. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a lot. Social media and marketing online is a long term, or as people call it, the long tail game, where
Yeah.
you have got all of the stuff that's going to last for a very long time that is still going to provide value of people being able to find you. And
Yeah.
that's really the strength of online stuff, because there is a real thing. Digital attrition of links and content and stuff like that happens all the time. Services go out of business, so you lose stuff that you might have created on that particular platform. Hey, I still have old stuff that's more than 10 years old that if I looked at, I would probably cringe. But I would hope somebody, if they do find it and look at it and go, this guy's insane, oh, well, I'll go to his website and hopefully learn that I'm not that insane.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, sorry. I just wanted to touch on that thing
No,
before.
no, no. That's great. Thanks for all the time. We really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody who tuned in. So I'm going to end it off here. Thanks, Shane. And I'm going to leave some information here, or there's some information in the comments here about how to get in touch with Shane. And I will talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.